Um, Here we are once more in the magic morning wood. Look, you can feel our post-election enthusiasm. Uh, great. But we'll power
From
through.
two non-Americans.
We'll power through,
How
and we'll try and present an entertaining and informative discussion to
about movies, which has nothing to do with politics,
no,
generally?
but just it just seeps into everything, doesn't it, really?
Yeah.
So, last time, sorry, that's Ron. I'm Clive, just in case you didn't know.
Hi.
And we're
Hi.
normally slightly less miserable, but always this good looking.
Always.
Um, so last film we spoke of was The Secret of Nicholas Tesla, right? Nikola Tesla.
Right.
And so we turned the algorithm machine on and we typed in some things and it did its magic and bubbles came out the top and we get side we get some side
Boob. Side boob.
no, not side boob, that's always good as well. What's the when something's a side product, that's not the correct word, like you kill a
Byproduct.
it's not side product, what's it called, it's a
Byproduct.
byproduct, thank you, that's the one, yes. And byproducts we get fizzy lifting drinks and we get
Fizzy,
everlasting
fizzy lifting drinks.
yes, and
They,
everlasting
they're
gobstoppers.
drinks for lifting weights, or
No, they're the fizzy lifting drinks from Willy Wonka, right? The ones that you drink and then you float.
oh, they make you. Oh, is that what
Yeah,
they're called? Lifting? Are they called lifting drinks?
fizzy lifting drinks, I think they were
Oh,
called.
okay. I thought they were called something else.
Everlasting gobstoppers.
Yeah, those I know.
What else? Anyway, there's a few, there's a few little byproducts, but mainly we choose our next films, right? So, who was in the last film? Oh yes, Orson Welles. So I went um, Orson Welles was
Right.
my link. Um, and I chose the 1971 French-Italian co-production 10 Days Wonder, which was a film I had not seen before. Had you seen it before, by any chance?
Nope.
Okay, doc. And I chose this because I was looking. I know Orson Welles has a number of kind of interesting acting credits in his filmography, as well, of course, as his more celebrated, well-known films as a director. Um, and I spotted, he's in a film by the great French director Claude Chabrol, and I've slowly become a bit of a Claude Chabrol fan in recent years, and kind of slowly going through his filmography. So I thought, oh, well, here's another chance to take a look at another one. Kind of an interesting. So I think people unfamiliar with Claude Chabrol's work. I don't know if you've seen any of his other
No.
films, but the kind of the one sentence kind of hot take that people always say is he's the French Hitchcock, right? That's the thing. Oh, Claude Chabrol, French Hitchcock. That's the thing I had always heard growing up.
Mm.
Um, but what I've discovered watching more and more of his films is there's a lot more to Chabrol than the French Hitchcock. Like I understand why they say that because um he makes kind of thrillers with a deep kind of psychological edge to them and the kind of material that I suppose Alfred Hitchcock would be drawn to. But I feel as if Claude Chabrol is a lot more um, he's a lot more interested in mood and and things other than like Hitchcock's films are great films, but they tend to be, finely tuned like a Swiss watch kind of thing, like
Mm.
this clicks into that, and they're all very exciting, and they create a lot of tension and suspense, but they're
Mm.
not necessarily always interested the other things surrounding that. Whereas Chabrol's films, like, so he made a film just before this called Just Before Nightfall, which is a great film. I need to see it again, actually. I think it might even be a classic, but I need to watch it again. But it's kind of, it does have a Hitchcockian crime at its center and someone trying to solve it, so who done it and that kind of thing. But it's more interested in like the aftermath and the collateral damage and the ennui and all the stuff around the main narrative driving force. And I find a lot of Chabrol films are like that, and Hitchcock films in general aren't, right? So yeah, so this was just another film for me to kind of further my thesis that Chabrol is much more than just the French Hitchcock, right? Based on an Ellery Queen novel. So also kind of worth going into, sorry, there's a lot of front loading here, but
No, go on.
so Ellery Queen, you've probably heard the name, I'm guessing, pop up here and there. But basically, Ellery Queen was the pseudonym for two guys, Frederick Dene and Manfred Lee, who created the Ellery Queen character in 1928. And Ellery Queen, so they write under the name Ellery Queen, and also the main character is Ellery Queen. So it seems as if he's writing his own novels.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he's basically a mystery novelist in New York City who helps, I think his father, starts off as his father is a police inspector, and he helps his father commit crimes. And between 1929 and 1971, there was about 40 books altogether, either Ellery Queen novels or collections of Ellery Queen short stories, with the main character being Ellery Queen. And all of those were written by Dene and Bennington. And also there's like loads of crime anthologies of other people's works that were collected, like Ellery Queen Presents. There was an Ellery Queen mystery magazine for many years with lots of people writing for that. And then in 1961, it becomes a house name as well. So loads of people start writing Ellery Queen books that aren't these two original gentlemen. But I think the distinction, from what I understand, and this was my first foray reading the book that this is based on, so it's all new to me. I think the books written under the house name that aren't written by Dene and Lee don't feature the Ellery Queen character. So it's just the house name of the writer, but the Ellery Queen character isn't in.
So this is one of those.
No. This is based on a Dene and Lee, one of the original Ellery Queen.
So in the book, one of the characters is named Ellery
Queen. Yes.
But no one in the movie is named that.
Not in the film. No, we'll get to that. So the character's in there, but they've changed the name.
Okay.
And also there was a radio show that went on for years. There was a bunch of different TV shows, and there's been a lot of movies over the years, but they tend to be like earlier in the 30s and 40s and 50s. And I think this must be one of the last Ellery Queen films, I think. And this is, all the way back in 1971. So that's the reason I mention it, is because I think some people may have heard the name. People who read lots of mystery and stuff have probably heard the name, but they might not necessarily know who Ellery Queen is. So that's basically Ellery Queen.
I'd never heard of Ellery Queen, to be honest. So.
Oh, okay. But then again, you don't necessarily read much old mysteries and detective
No.
No.
Yeah. I like mysteries, but maybe not that time period. So yeah, I didn't.
Right.
They're British, I assume, right?
No, it's American. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No. It's one of those. Old zeitgeist things, right? That is no longer zeitgeist. But
right.
So, yes. So, the Ellery Queen character is in this film. That's the character played by Michel Piccoli, who I'm always glad to see. And it's a bit difficult to tell because he seems to be a professor, and at a certain point, the Orson Welles character does mention, I've read everything you've ever written or whatever. So he seems to actually be playing Ellery Queen, except he's called something else, right? He's not called Ellery Queen.
Yeah, he's Paul Regis, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is but he's like a psychology professor.
Right, right.
Yeah.
At some point, someone does mention that they'd read everything he's written, but that could be just some psychology textbook, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but he's kind of a surrogate Ellery Queen and behaves quite differently from. So I didn't finish it. I started to read the book that this is based on. I didn't get a chance to finish it in time for watching the film. It was the first time I'd ever read an Ellery Queen book, and yeah, pretty pretty good, well written mystery.
Pretty,
Pretty,
pretty
pretty
good.
good. Yeah. Although not, it didn't strike me as like amazing. But no, solid. I can see why people would have enjoyed these um
Right.
back in the day. But even
Where did this fall in the bibliography? Like closer to the beginning, middle, or closer to the end of the original Ellery Queen?
48, so I guess somewhere in the middle. I think
In
it's
the
a
middle.
run of three or four books set. So obviously this has been relocated to it's France, right? It's been relocated to France, but the original book is like some sort of uh place like upstate from New York or somewhere like that.
Okay.
And I think I think he did two or three books that were set, and they're considered like the some of the best of the Ellery Queen
Right.
novels. But if you're interested, there's a very reasonably priced Kindle. I think it was like $3.29 or something
Okay.
like that. So I thought I'd give it, and I got about a third of the way through it. But it was enough to know that the film does deviate somewhat, certainly in tone. Um, we should also mention that we were watching so it's I think it was largely shot in English. You can kind of tell that everyone's speaking in English, but it has been post dubbed as well, right? Although there seems to be some moments when it's onset sound and some when it's
Yeah.
not. But so we watched that version. As far as I know, there's no HD version of this out either, so it's not the best quality, but not not bad. Um, so Anthony Perkins is I guess our the big name here, and he seems to be a young artist. Anthony Perkins, to be honest, is probably a little bit too old for the role, but um, yeah, and he's suffering from blackouts, right? He's suffering from blackouts. He wakes up in places he doesn't know how he got there and stuff. So he goes to his friend, who in the novel is Ellery Queen. In this case, is what's his name, Paul something or other, played by
Paul
Michel
Regis.
Piccoli, who was one of his university professors, I suppose. And then Anthony Perkins kind of invites him to go to his family home to because he has something he has to tell him. He has a secret as well, right? He goes there and he meets his adopted father, Orson Welles, who seems to be whispering through most of this film. He doesn't really raise his voice much. He's quite quiet in this film.
and
So,
and gigantic pauses that you could drive a truck through.
yeah, that's a very Orson, that's a very
Yeah.
Wellesian thing to do, though, right?
Yeah.
Um, so and also Marlene Jobert, who is like Orson Welles's beautiful, um, quite fetching,
Young.
freckled wife. She's definitely got there's something about her, isn't there? She's got a very specific kind of beauty, I thought, and quite different from I've seen her in other films as well. And I suppose the other character is Orson Welles's the uncle, his brother, as played by Guido Alberti, who's quite amusingly grumpy. Like he's always just there, like making snide remarks and stuff, right? So yeah, so spoilers alert, it turns out that Anthony Perkins has fallen in love with his stepmother, I guess. and we get flashbacks. We find out how Anthony Perkins was adopted, and also she is.
which I believe is the this is the basis for most pornos these days.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's the new thing is stepmom, I think.
Ah, okay, okay. In the US.
I think so, yeah. That's what I hear anyway.
Ah, okay.
Not that I would know, I wouldn't know.
I suppose it's yeah, I suppose it's the safe way to do it, right? Like back in the 70s, with films like Taboo and stuff like that, it would have just been fucking your mom, right? But
Right,
now they've decided to soften it up and our
right,
stepmom, that's safe,
right,
you know.
right.
Yeah. Um yes, and yeah, it turns out as well she, Jobert, is kind of also from the wrong side of the tracks and kind of been raised by him since she lost her family when she was a kid. It's interesting. I wonder how much those flashbacks, like in 71, now it looks like grooming, doesn't it? You have these scenes of big
Yeah,
Orson Welles turning up and like taking this little girl in hand and like
yeah, it was,
it marrying. I think that stuff plays very differently now, maybe than it did then.
yeah. Like he was basically, yeah, basically a kid. He just basically took her from her family. It's supposed to be like this kind of like saving her from this kind of poor, but he was like just taking this kid and then married her, right? It was like real weird. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's definitely something where I think the Times have changed because reading the book, even though I didn't finish the book, from the book you don't get any feeling that this is supposed to be considered in any way, shape, or form weird. He's just
Unsavory.
benevolent, right there, and
Right.
so that's the thing. The Orson Welles character is supposed to be extremely, and he's mentioned always almost as being a god, right? And then Anthony Perkins is a sculptor, and he's supposed to be doing these sculptures of the gods of Olympus, and then there's a blackmail plot, yada yada yada. So anyway, there's a lot of little twists and turns. I think that's probably. I mean, we can specifically spoil certain things if we want to. So spoiler alert up front, just in case. But I think that's enough of a setup. So what did you make of 10 Days Wonder, Ron?
Well, you go first because it was your first.
Okay, all right, if you insist. Yeah. So in some ways, I kind of got what I want in terms of furthering my thesis about Chabrol. So this very much it has that, it's almost because you could have set this up as a very kind of straightforward whodunit, right?
Right.
But this is almost straying into like horror film territory every now and again, right? It's very surreal. It's got these roving camera. It's almost dreamlike at times, and it's got this very dark, like quite naturalistic cinematography, which I quite like. And then there's like a scene with a mother in a bed, a character who we've never seen before, and she's almost like a witch or something. And then that casts this weird spell because you see this witch of a mother, and there's another scene right after with this nighttime car chase with Anthony Perkins going to a graveyard and Orson Welles suddenly turning up in the back of Michelle Piccoli's car, and like it's like you could tell Claude Chabrol was kind of wrestling with the material a little bit. Like he didn't just want to do, and I, again, without having seen too, I need to see more of his work because he was quite prolific. I sense this was something he actually probably did quite often because a lot of his works seems to have been based on um, literary sources that would be more in the kind of whodunit vein. But then he does his Chabrol thing with it. Like I said, he's not really that interested, it seems to me, with just telling a whodunit. He's interested in all the peripheral kind of
Right.
stuff, right? So I appreciate that he's trying to do that. And overall, I found the film definitely worth watching, and it had a nice atmosphere. I thought the cast was really good, and it did have a kind of yeah, this kind of very Chabrolian ennui, which I connect with. But it's probably one of his more minor works that I've seen. So overall, I'd say it's it's pretty good, and it's not just a straight up and down whodunit, but um it doesn't quite break through into being something totally spellbinding and utterly convincing. I think is, but I enjoy. I'm glad I watched it. It was worth a watch.
Okay. As for me, um, do you remember a few we were talking recently about how when you what were you talking about? Like I can't remember exactly how it came up, but you were talking about how when you have to study or learn about something that you're not interested in, you just physically can't do it.
Yes, that is my main vice.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Like if it's like, for example, what was an example? Like it was something like taxes or something, or what was the example we were talking about?
Um, I think it came. I was talking about like exams in school or something like that. Though.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're not interested in the subject, you just couldn't actually sit
Right.
down.
Yeah, I couldn't
And,
absorb the information. Yeah.
yeah. So that was this movie for me.
Oh,
It was, yeah, I like, it was, yeah, like I had to like a visceral reaction to actually having to watch this movie. Like it was like, I had to get like a Clockwork Orange ocular speculum to keep my
oh,
eyes
wow.
on
Okay.
it. Like
Interesting.
I just could not focus or find anything redeeming in this movie at all. It was like,
That
yeah, I
surprises
watched like I watched like the first, few minutes. It started out kind of strong with Anthony Perkins waking up in a hotel room with blood on his hands, and then it just devolved to just boring nonsense. It was so
Oh, really?
boring,
Wow.
so boring. I watched this movie on about 5 or 10 minutes in when I realized that it was that I my reaction to it. I put it on 1.5 speed to watch it.
Oh,
I watched it on a 1.5 speed, and it was still dragging. And it was still like I was like, why are there so many long pauses? And that was with 1.5 speed. I
that's
just,
that's
it
interesting
was, it
because
just bored me so much that I had this really like visceral. And and usually I try to find like, oh yeah, but I mean, I liked kind of the camera work, and I'm trying to find things that I like. But I just, this time I was like, you know what? This movie is too boring. That's it, and that's all I'm gonna say is that it was so boring, and yeah, I just could not get into it. I had this sort of like it was like I had to fight myself to actually look at the screen to look at it, even watch it for
wow,
even for a minute. It just drove me nuts. It
wow.
was like you trying to study for your exams. Like it
I
was,
should
yeah,
have saved it for Valentine's. Huh? Um,
yeah. I didn't think I mean, I don't mind murder mysteries, but for some reason, and I like Orson Welles and stuff like that, and like Anthony Perkins, but I thought that it would be kind of enjoyable, but I just really thought it was so boring.
wow.
I
I'm genuinely surprised because I can usually at least kind of spot, like I can spot a red flag for
yeah.
Ron, and sometimes gleefully look for them. But so I can sense Ron might have a hard time. I have to admit, didn't enter my mind at all that this would be one that you
I
would
mean,
have that
it is
trouble with.
possible that I just am not in a great mindset these days to go through sort of um movies that require a little more patience.
Okay.
But yeah, it was so boring. And I was like, what is it with Clive? He just cannot, he's like allergic to picking movies that are even remotely fun or just interesting to watch.
I resemble that remark.
Like I don't know. I mean I really I mean it should have been enjoyable. I don't mind. I like again. I liked the actors in it. That in other things. I didn't. There wasn't any in on paper. There shouldn't have been anything wrong with this, but there's some maybe. It could have been the Chabrol that I don't like. That
Yeah, I wonder. I
I find
wonder.
it was,
Hmm.
I think that if it was a straight ahead murder mystery, I think I would have enjoyed that maybe. But this sort of like dreamlike, abstract kind of surrealism, I think it just bored me to tears, and I was just not that. I lost interest. Yeah. So
I think we'll have to find out one of these. Like at some point if the option comes up, I'll see if I can pick like one of the more classic. Chabrol's that people that everyone agreed is one of his classics, and
Yeah.
we see, yes, maybe I can maybe kind of see that might make a little bit of sense actually, having you having a Chabrol allergy, but we'll maybe see at some point in the future. I promise I'll pick like what, because I don't think, even though I got on with it, even though I don't think this is top tier Chabrol
Yeah.
by any means. So
Yeah.
possibly better Chabrol
Yeah.
might convince you, but
And also, I mean, I was trying to reflect, at least trying to find something that I could at least think about while I was watching this movie. But um, Orson Welles in general is kind of an interesting case by himself. Like he has this
certainly is.
very specific acting style, which is he has this kind of like I mean I guess you would call it a naturalism or realism to his acting style, where he's really tries to make it sound like he's like really talking, like it's like he's
Hmm.
really kind of in the moment and stuff. Of course, you know, he could pick up his cues a little bit more. I think in general, I think he uses the pause. I mean, you have to earn a pause. I don't think he always earns it, right? So, um,
Well,
but
the other thing with him as well was he was notorious, and in his later years, and he was notorious for being difficult to direct. Like he
mm,
would, he would, you had to be on your toes because he would start to take over things. Like
mm,
a bunch of different directors who worked with him, and they said he was kind of bit like Harry Kamel talks about when they made Malpertuis, which was a very interesting film from around the same time period, where he'd go out to eat with Orson Welles in the evening and talk with him, and it was a wonderful experience. It was fantastic. He really enjoyed it. But actually, on set directing him, he was horrible. He would just like not do what you was told and say, "Shouldn't that camera be over there?" Or "What are you doing?" And the other thing I remember hearing about him, and it struck me actually in the final scene of this film, was he insisted on often doing his own makeup.
mm,
The final scene in this, when he has like this makeup that's supposed to make him kind of having aged, prematurely because of something that happens. Like
mm,
it looks a bit overdone.
mm.
I think if this film was released in HD, that would actually probably look shockingly overdone. Like, and I was
Mm.
wondering, did he maybe
Or
do
maybe
his own
stage
makeup?
makeup.
And I think he might have put on his. He also is notorious. He liked wearing fake noses and shit. I think he might
Well,
have.
I mean, a lot of the comments in this movie is about how he has a fake nose on, and you can see all the makeup goes up to the nose, but not on
Yes,
the nose, right?
that's exactly what I mean. In that final
Yeah,
scene, it's particularly noticeable. Like from here down, it's quite dark, and then there's nothing up here.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and I was wondering if that was he was responsible for that, maybe.
Well, I mean, that sort of makes a lot of sense too, because what I noticed about him in this movie, and as also in the last one, the one we were acting to the Tesla, is that
Mm,
he doesn't try to match anybody else in
r-
his scenes. You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
He's always himself. He's always does it his way. And but he always stands out. And it's I mean, at first I mean in Tesla I think he stood out because I think he was natural, whereas everyone else was very wooden and monotone. Whereas
Well,
this
he's
one,
speaking in his native tongue as well makes a difference.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were other American actors in Tesla that were also in the movie, but they were also still monotone, right? So
Oh, I don't know. The only other major one was Strother Martin, right? And I think he was. I think most of the other people were struggling in a second tongue. I think
mm,
in the case of that film.
anyway,
But you're
anyway,
quite right, though. I mean, be careful what you wish for if you bring Orson Welles into your film, right? Because
sure, yeah.
I mean, people always talk of him. The phrase they use is mercurial, right? But the
Mm,
thing is also in terms of like a fucking planet, right? He's got
mm,
this kind of magnetic energy,
mm,
and he will totally rule over your film if you
sure,
bring him
yeah.
in.
Yeah, but I mean the same thing is like in this one, he's just sort of like he's doing his thing in his way, which didn't really match with everybody else in the movie. Like the way, you
Ah,
know,
interesting.
like I thought
I
that
thought he matched the material in this film myself. I
he
didn't
matched the
feel,
material. I thought he was
yeah.
fine, but he didn't match the other actors, is what I mean. So the other actors were kind of doing one kind of style thing, whereas he was doing his own thing. And I don't know. I find that he, especially in these two movies, really stood out for me. Not necessarily in a good way, but just
Just
he's
so that.
like he's just stood out as
Right,
being
right.
different and not matching. And I'm and yeah, maybe especially like in Tesla, he was like the most kind of, I guess, naturalistic actor. But I'm curious as to whether or not it's better to do your thing the best you can do versus matching
Matching
and
the right.
matching the tone of the whole piece, right? So and not standing out. You know what I mean? So
I Yeah, I suppose in this film, his kind of antithesis as a way is Anthony Perkins, right? Because
hmm,
Anthony Perkins is all kind of
yeah,
this energy, and there's definitely a kind of a gap there. Of course, he directed Anthony Perkins in The Trial, which is one of his better films he directed, I think. And they were in a few films together. But yeah, there's definitely they are kind of poles apart in this
hmm.
film. But again, I have to admit, I didn't feel I didn't feel that there was like a tonal shift from when Orson Welles was speaking or being considered, and then other characters. You felt as if there was a kind of a gap there somewhere.
Not a tonal shift, but a an acting style shift, right? And
But
you
wouldn't that affect the tone of the film or
it depends, I guess, on your definition of tone in this case. I mean, I find like the the atmosphere or the tone of the film I thought was still the same because it was kind of
right,
being
right,
spearheaded by Chabrol,
yeah.
and the story, whatever. But I think that I felt there was a disconnect between scenes that he was in, especially when he was in with other actors, and trying to do a dialogue. I don't know. I just sort of I was trying to find something to talk about because I couldn't really talk about the rest of this movie. So
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, the one thing I suppose the movie does fail to do a little bit, I felt was, you're supposed to think of Orson Welles almost from the get-go. It's almost like these people are in a religious cult or something. Like there's a lot of reverence for
mm,
him, more so than certainly in the parts of the book that I read. And yes, that felt slightly unearned because
uh,
you're supposed to think of him almost like people refer to him as a god. And
mm,
I thought, oh, he's just a nice whispering fat man. I didn't necessarily, he didn't
yeah.
quite, it wasn't quite put across why he was as revered as he was.
Uh, yeah. And
Uh,
I think the other thing that kind of disappointed me was that it started out so strong with this mystery of him, Anthony Perkins waking up in a hotel room after a blackout. He's got blood on his hands. You don't know what's going on. But it sort of didn't really seem to be, it was almost forgotten until the end of the movie. It was sort of like, I didn't feel like it was really talked again or earned or and even like the IMDb, like the summary says, Anthony Perkins, a young sculptor with a weird penchant for waking up in strange hotels with his memory wiped clean and bloodied hands. But I don't think he had a penchant for it. That means like
no,
that he
no,
was but at the same time it gave the impression that it happened several times, right? But
it does. It does
um
in the book. They explain
it
that
does
more
in
in
the
the book,
book.
but in the film, not
But
so
yeah,
much.
but
No.
they only did it the one time, and then it was sort of like not even really discussed again. And so I don't know. It was
You're
really,
quite right. You're quite right.
yeah,
That's why I was saying, in some ways, I feel as if Chabrol just took the kind of skeleton of the book and then did what he wanted to do,
right, yeah.
as opposed to doing a straight adaptation.
Yeah, I think probably my main issue was that all the surrealism and all that stuff. I think the problem with it for me was it drained out any really tension or kind of like expectations or suspense in this kind of movie. Even though
Yes,
it's supposed
yes.
to be a mystery, and so I didn't really care.
Right. It sounds as if,
So
oddly enough, you've kind of backed up my thesis in a way as well. I think
yeah,
you would have preferred a Hitchcock film,
sure, yeah, probably, yeah,
whereas this is not a very un-Hitchcock film from the
mm,
man people keep calling the fucking French
yeah,
Hitchcock. Stop
sure.
it. He's not French Hitchcock. Um,
Mm,
right. Okay. There we go. There
yeah,
we go. You had something to say. We got a bit
something.
of mileage out of it.
We'll get through it. Yeah.
So I sense you might have a bit more to say about your choice, though.
Mhm.
So let us go with your choice and what led you to it.
Okay, so I went through Strother Martin.
Hmm.
who and so I chose. So I went through. I was going through Orson Welles' kind of bibliography, or not bibliography, sorry, filmography,
Hmm.
and I was like, I was thinking maybe another Orson Welles movie, but then I went through Strother Martin, who I was less familiar with, and then I didn't remember. I'd forgotten that he was in a movie called Slapshot, so I decided to choose Slapshot, and Slapshot actually is uh, so for me, the reason I went with Slapshot is Slapshot, of course, is for those of you who don't know, it's a late 70s movie starring Paul Newman, Michael Ontkean, and Strother Martin, Jennifer Warren, um, among other people.
Lindsay
And
Krause is, I
huh?
suppose, Lindsay Krause is the big name, I suppose.
Gross.
Mentioned. Yeah.
Right, Lindsay Krause. And yeah, so anyway, and it's of course, a hockey movie, right? It's a comedy about hockey. And this, of course, coming from Canada, this was sort of a revered movie amongst my I don't know, I'm gonna say peer group because it kind of came out the year I was born, but it's sort of amongst Canadians in general, a Slapshot is considered one of the better hockey movies, I guess you could
Right.
say, right? So
Right. We
yeah,
should we should point out that it's not set in kind of it's set in like
no,
they from Pennsylvania or something like that.
Pennsylvania, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so, yeah, I was oddly enough, I was
No,
thinking that while watching, I was thinking, well, I'm sure this would because of course
no.
Canada's hockey mad much more so than the US, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so being, of course, Canada being a big hockey country, when you talk about hockey and hockey movies, often Slapshot comes up. Myself not being a sports fan or a hockey fan, even though I'd heard a lot about this movie, I'd actually never seen it.
No,
So
I
I
didn't get it.
yeah, yeah. So I'd heard about it for years, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of my friends had seen it, and they used to talk about it and kind of joke about it and quote it and stuff like that. And I know that the Henson brothers were like these kind of like kind of mythical film characters that people referenced a lot, but
Hmm.
I'd never really seen it. So I was like, okay, well, this is my chance to finally see this movie. So just a quick thing, directed by George Roy Hill, written by Nancy Dowd. And so
Who's
as I
in it
said,
as well somewhere?
hmm?
Nancy Dowd's in it as well, right?
In it as well,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. And starring again, as I said, Paul Newman. And yeah, so it's sort of a Cinderella, rags to riches,
Yeah. We should mention Paul Newman, of course, had been in George Roy Hill's Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid,
right.
right?
Mhm.
And we did another George Roy Hill film earlier. We did The Great Waldo Pepper, right? That was another
Right.
George Roy Hill,
Mhm.
which we
Yeah.
enjoyed.
Which
Nancy
was
Dowd also seems to have she did like another similar film, but about American football, right? Called North Dallas 40, which I've also
oh,
not seen. I think maybe Chris Christopherson, who just recently died, I think he might
yeah.
be in it. And
Okay.
I think that holds a similar place for people, for fans of American football as Slapshot does for hockey. So she seems
Right.
to know her onions when it comes to these kind of
Sports and
things.
sports
Yeah,
movies, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, again, it's a kind of a tropey sports movie, and that they're kind of like they're the underdogs, and they lose a lot, and then so then they decide to try something new, and then start winning, and they bring in some new people, and then they start winning, and then spoiler, I guess they end up winning the championship, but
Mm.
it's done in a much kind of unconventional way, right? So it's not just uh usually it's like they have I mean, we ourselves were in a movie like this
This is
yeah.
true. Yes.
Yeah, so where you and I met in a movie which had a very similar kind of story in terms of the underdogs. We were in a baseball movie where the Japanese team decided to try a new tactic and then started winning, and 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 came back, right? So but this one, rather than just sort of trying a new tactic or bring in, so what they do is they bring in these three guys called the Hanson brothers,
Mm.
uh, who all have these like really big thick glasses and kind of longish hair. They look almost like triplets, but they're like a year
Yeah.
apart,
I
basically,
was
right?
thinking of them as like the hockey Ramones.
Yeah, basically, yeah, kind of idea. So, and as far as I understand, at least two or maybe all three of them were actually professional
Yeah, all
hockey
three
players.
of them, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One was like Wayne Gretzky's roommate for a while or something. So,
Okay. I've heard
yeah.
of him. He's a hockey
Yeah,
player.
him.
I
Yeah,
know that.
him. I
Yeah.
know. He's the great one. Anyway, and so they come in and they're these kind of like idiotic, kind of childish. They bring they come they've
Toys.
been
Yeah.
traded onto the team and they come in with their suitcase, they're full of toys, right? Their trains and stuff, and they're spending their off time kind of in their home hotel room playing with their toys and stuff. But it turns out that they're goons, right? And so goon is
Yes.
the term for hockey bruisers,
Yes.
so
But that's the
they
other big conflict, isn't it? As well as the underdog thing going on. There's
right.
kind of between Michael Onkin and Paul Newman's like, we'll try anything to get. So
To
he's
win.
like encouraging more violence and goon-like
Mm.
behavior, and
Yeah.
Michael
So,
Onkin's
well,
doing none of it.
that happens once these guys kind of come in. So at first
Right.
they're not sure, they don't play them, and they're like, they don't really know what to do with these guys. So, randomly they end up getting put in. I guess they had someone, they dropped someone, got kicked out, whatever, and so they brought these guys in, and then realized
Brother
that,
Martin is the coach as well, by the way, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Not the
so
coach,
they bring
sorry. He's the manager. The
the
Paul Newman's
manager,
the
yeah,
coach.
the owner, yeah, the
Yeah,
guy,
yeah,
not the owner, the manager, yeah. So,
yeah.
um, and so they bring in these three guys, and finally they play them, and they realize that they're like these goons, that they're just knocking everybody down and just starting fights willy nilly, and it becomes really popular. And so then Paul Newman gets the idea. It's like, this is great. This is bringing more people in. So we'll do that. And so he wants to keep going the goon route, and gooning it up and getting more and more violence and more fights. But Michael Onkin, rebels against that, saying like, no, I'm here to play hockey. The respect for the sport, and I want to play, proper hockey. And so that's a lot of their conflict. And as well, and Michael Onkin has a kind of is having marital problems where his wife is a bit of a kind of a tomboy, and she hates being there and doesn't want to be in the town and stuff, hates hockey in general, and so he's got some conflict there. And yeah, and so then they goon it up, and then to the point where they get in the final, in the championship. And so the kind of the climax is the championship, where against their rivals, who end up bringing in a bunch of like goon ringers, basically, right? So like, from like, throughout the movie, they're kind of peppered with names about people who were, famously goons, or were kicked out of the league, or suspended or whatever, for being like violent, extra violent, and they've basically drafted all of them onto the team to fight in this very last. So basically, the whole last game is just, it's just like a bar brawl, basically like a wrestling match. And then Michael Keane finally kind of decides to make peace with it, and instead of fighting, goes in and does a strip tease. And so it becomes, and then by default they end up, and the other team gets disqualified, and by default they win. Right. So yeah. So anyway, it is anyway, how'd you get on with Slapshot?
Um, well, let me do the same thing you did to me then, because
Okay.
your first watch as well. Let's see how you
Yeah.
got it.
Okay. Yeah, I it was a lot funnier than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. But yeah, I thought the Hansons were hilarious. I thought they were, they really made me laugh, and I am quite glad that I finally watched this movie. I'd heard about the Hanson brothers all these years, and
Yeah.
so, and they were quite fun. My favorite was when there was like, they come on one scene, they're just like doing a warm up skate. They're just like skating just as a warm up, and like they're just kind of skating in circles, and he keeps looking over at the scene, and then he goes. He just like just randomly like, and it just starts to fight. I don't know. Every time they started like doing this like random acts of violence, actually, I thought it was quite funny. It was really like, the physical comedy was
I
quite amazing to me.
I
I really,
laughed. There was one bit they made me laugh where after they've had a big dust up at the very beginning before any of the officials come on, and then the officials come on, and then they stand for the Star Spangled Banner, and like one
yeah.
of the officials is like furious, and he goes over and he's trying to tell them off, and he goes, "I'm listening to the fucking song." I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, that was good too. Yeah, and then at the end also, when they finally win the championship, and he's like, "I just go, okay, you win. Here, you take it, you fucking bum," like something like that, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, it's interesting. I kind of enjoyed it as
I
well,
enjoy
but not so much. Not so much that it was like laugh out loud funny, but it was just I had a lot of goodwill
it.
towards it. It's kind of it's a bit of a feel good film, and more than that, it took me back. It's the kind of gritty feel good film that
Mm,
they don't make anymore, right? There's
mm,
like you think about things like well, like Rocky to a certain extent,
mm.
but like the other one people forget is like because it's kind of an underdog story, not a sports one, is Saturday Night Fever, right?
Ah,
And I think people think Saturday Night Fever is all like, nice Bee Gees dancing and pointing and stuff. And then you watch the film and it's quite a harsh film and it's
mm,
got lots of
right.
like it's got a rape scene and it's got lots of gritty working class stuff and yeah, and some of the stuff out of the people's mouths in this film you would not get
Yeah.
away with in a
Yeah,
mainstream
yeah, yeah.
film
I
today.
mean, it's shockingly racist and sexist and
Yeah, yeah.
all
But
the
it's
is,
but it
kind of thing.
feels
But yeah,
authentic as well. I
well,
think
like,
that's the thing. Like it doesn't feel like they've gone out of their way to be shocking. It just feels like it's straight out of a locker room, right?
yeah, sure, yeah,
It's quite authentic. But yes, you could, and there's a bit that even made me think, holy shit, you wouldn't get away with that now. There's a bit where Paul Newman insults a woman by saying, "Oh, your little boy looks like a faggot."
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's just wow. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it took me back to a certain time and place. I can imagine if I'd have seen and the other one I was thinking of is The Longest Yard, right?
Mm,
The prison American football one with Burt Reynolds, the Robert Aldrich film. That's of this kind of vintage as well, right? So yeah, it was very interesting to see something.
or like the Bad News Bears.
I don't think that was quite as foul
Yeah,
mouthed
yeah, yeah.
this
Was it? I can't remember. I feel like it was.
wasn't that more
Was
for
it?
kids?
It
Bad news.
was, but I feel like it was like the kids where they used to swear in the kids' movies. Wasn't it? No, I don't know.
Maybe
But
I don't know if
yeah,
I've
I
even
can't
actually
remember. I
seen the
haven't
Bad
seen it in years.
News
So
Bears.
yeah,
Certainly the Mighty Ducks wouldn't behave like this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there was a kind of yeah. Let's put it this way. I can see why this is some people's like favorite film of all time,
Mm,
or
sure.
why
Yeah,
it
yeah.
has a cult. Because I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming it would have been a hit when it was new, but I actually don't know. I can kind of see it might not have been, even though it had Paul Newman and the association with George Roy Hill going back to Butch Cassidy and the Sting and stuff. But I don't know if it was a major hit when it was new, but it certainly gained a massive
Yeah.
audience over the years,
Well,
right?
as I said, growing up, this was sort of like just part of like the fabric of the Canadian, hockey kind of I guess you'd call it zeitgeist, I guess, whatever. But
Right.
yeah, it was just I was never into hockey, so I just never really got into that whole thing. But my friends who are in hockey like revere this movie, right? They
Yeah.
speak
Yeah.
like yeah, with
Yeah, certainly less so in the UK because but again, it would have been a film that I remember playing on television. And again, like you, I just didn't watch because I wasn't really interested in hockey. But
mm,
yeah, people would thought it was a lot of fun and it had that kind of underdog working class spirit, warts and all,
mm.
right? Forgot to mention M. Walsh is in it as well, which is always
Yes, I've watched. Yes, yeah, yeah.
Paul Dooley, very briefly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Well,
fills up.
the one thing I thought was slightly odd was so you hear the song right back where we started from by Maxine Nightingale, this kind of soul song, like several times in this film, which I thought was it's a great song. I don't, so I'm quite happy to hear it several times. But it's odd to hear a song several times in a film without it being like a plot point. Did you notice that?
Right, sure. Yeah.
All right, da, 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 came out again and again and again. I thought, is this going to be a plot thing? But it's
Yeah.
not. And I just thought it's really weird. It reminded me of that episode of Father Ted where the priest who does the disco like only has a copy of Ghost Town by the Specials and just plays it over
Oh.
and over and over again. It was just, that's weird. Why do they play? It's a great song, but still, it's like
Yeah.
usually you don't
Might
usually.
might have been like a budgetary thing that's the only song they could afford or something. They
I don't
just
know.
put it in there right there.
I don't
So
know. It seems like it would have had anyway. I just thought that was didn't make any difference, didn't ruin
yeah.
anything, but it was just notable. Um,
Mm.
so this film did have a couple of direct-to-video sequels as well, right? In the
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
in the aughts, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So there must be much old. I mean, just the Hansons are back. I think are the only ones that come back.
yeah.
I think.
No one else came back, I
Yeah,
don't think.
No,
I
yeah,
know the
but,
second one's got that great thespian Stephen Baldwin in it.
right. Yes.
I don't think he's in the. I don't know who's in the
Mm.
third
Yeah,
one.
well, yeah, I don't know,
I have
but
no idea if they were pleased the fans, if they lived up to it.
I doubt it. I think they were probably just sort of like they were, yeah, I don't know. I remember I remember hearing that there were sequels, but I had never seen the original, so I never bothered to watch them, whatever. But I'm not sure if it was they were hits or not. So, but I certainly not as much as the first one, I'm sure.
No, out of curiosity, again, this is not your wheelhouse, so you might not know, but you might know from other people. You said this was like considered, one of the great hockey films.
Hmm.
What else is on that list? Because I know there's like in recent years, people seem to like that film Goon with that bloke from
Goon,
American
yes.
Pie-In,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Anything else on the list of great hockey films? Because I can only think of the Mighty Ducks, and I don't think they're probably considered great hockey films, are they?
Not generally, but
No,
there's that movie Miracle.
I don't know that.
Yeah, I think it's Kurt Russell, I think. Um
Okay,
Kurt Russell, and it was about the it's a famous story that Americans love to tell over and over again because Canadians are really proud of our hockey heritage and our hockey prowess, and usually we win in the Olympics. Usually it's
okay,
us or the Russians, basically, right? So there was this one, I think it was in the 80s or 70s, where the it was basically an under again, it was a real life true underdog story where the American team came in and ended up winning the gold because they kind of came from behind, and it was like a big story, and it was considered at the time a miracle that they won. And so there's a movie called
okay.
Miracle where you have Kurt Russell doing
What's
that.
the
So
what's the what's the vintage? 80s? Are we talking or
the movie,
yeah?
movie or the real story.
Well, both actually. Now that I'm asking, if you know.
I believe the real story was in the 70s or 80s. The movie was 2004.
Oh, okay, it's more recent. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it was 1980. It was the 1980 hockey team. Yeah,
Oh, because
so
when you say Kurt Russell, I would have assumed, but maybe he's the manager or
coach or
something.
something. I can't
Right,
remember the
right.
coach or something. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, there's Goon. I don't know anyone. There's yeah, not a lot of them. Happy Gilmore is kind of a hockey movie
Okay, okay.
because he starts off as a hockey player, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I think those are the big ones. Yeah, there's not a lot of hockey movies, I don't think. Yeah.
Right. So Slapshot is probably
The bigger, yeah,
that's the
yeah. When you think of
yeah.
hockey movies, Slapshot's the go-to, I guess, right? Other than Mighty Ducks, which is less
Right.
so, I think so.
But
Mm.
yeah, I think it certainly is a good example of a film, and this is what I always heard of it. I suspected, but and again, I'm glad you chose it just because it kind of forced me to watch it. It is a film that works regardless of whether you care about the sport.
Hockey or not. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, again, I still don't really care about hockey that much, but
No,
I have to say I generally enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a good laugh. I'd heard about the Hanson brothers, but yeah, I really enjoyed the Hanson brothers a lot. I thought, yeah, I think I laughed probably more than you did, but yeah, because I was like, I found myself laughing quite a lot, more than I really expected to, because I thought
yeah,
some of the the blatant, like senseless violence was quite hilarious in this movie,
right.
actually. Yeah,
Other films as well. I was thinking slightly adjacent, not sports exactly, but in that similar vein, from a different part of the world, but have that kind of, or you might not necessarily be interested in male strippers or brass bands, but like the Full Monty and Brassed Off kind of
hmm.
also slightly fit into a
Sure, yeah.
similar kind of it taps into a similar spot, right? That
Hmm.
that
Sure,
always
yeah, yeah,
makes
yeah.
you kind of
Yeah, the outcasts who make good, right? Or
yeah, but also with that, I think the
in an
specific
amusing
working
way.
class kind of
In class, yeah, yeah.
football,
The working class outcasts that
yeah,
find something out of the box
yeah, and
to win
with
with
grit. I
grit.
think
Yeah,
the
with grit.
grit
Yeah,
is
sure,
important,
sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because yeah, I guess they don't make films like this, or at least mainstream films like this in the United States anymore. They might occasionally do something like this out of the UK,
Mm,
maybe, but maybe some other countries have their own
mm,
version. Maybe
right,
they still.
sure.
So it'd be kind of interesting to.
And I guess one interesting point also from IMDb was that Paul Newman said that this was his favorite movie that he made.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So that he had the most fun on this movie, I think. And that's, yeah. So,
Is he still alive? I can't remember.
no, I think he passed away. Yeah. He passed
Did
away.
he?
Re-
Yeah, no,
re-
actually, that is worth mentioning as well. That he is very good in this film. Like
Yeah.
he's one of those like because he's a
Yeah.
proper fucking
2008, he died.
all
2008.
right, proper big fucking proper film star, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
More people would go and see films because he was in them. But luckily, he was also a strong actor as well, right? Like,
Yes. Of course. Yeah. Yeah, and didn't really stick out too much in this movie. I mean, like it could have been
no,
too much like
no,
about him, but he was sort of like he did what his role was,
exactly, yeah. And it's
was
in some ways a
necessary.
very you can imagine some stars of that caliber not wanting to do because
Mm.
he's not exactly a lovable character. He tries stealing that other guy's missus away from him,
Yeah,
and like,
yeah,
and yeah, gets up to some pretty like from the get go. He like whenever he learns some sensitive secret about someone on the other team, he just blurts it out.
sure, yeah,
And some
yeah,
of that stuff's kind of cruel, like making a
mm.
guy piss himself on the court, and like your wife's a dyke and all that stuff. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's so he's yeah, he's not a lily white character by any means, and yeah, so he's good like that. And I remember when he was in Heads Like a Proxy, he played like a quite kind of
mm.
mean. So yeah, props to Paul Newman for like not letting his image get in the way of doing good work,
Sure, yeah, yeah,
I think.
right.
Um, right, okay, there we go then. So that was your 10 Days Wonder and Slapshot. Again, a quite peculiar double bill.
Peculiar, yeah. I'm sure we are the only people pairing these movies up.
Right. And yeah, we'll pair another couple of totally random films
Yeah,
going off of Slapshot,
that's
of
all.
course.
Right.
Yeah. So until then,
Next
uh,
time,
yeah,
ta
cheerio.
ta.